Attention, brave souls. What you're about to witness might make your heart race. Before the suspense takes over your screen, click subscribe now and hit the like button. Get ready for a spine-chilling experience. But be warned, only the boldest will survive until the end.
My name is Nathan White. I'm 35 years old, a captain in the Navy SEALs, and the leader of a unit so classified it doesn't officially exist. We call ourselves Phantom Viper. On paper, we're a task force that deals with rogue technology, stuff the public isn't ready to know about. But the truth is far stranger than any classified document could ever admit. We handle things that shouldn't exist, the kind of things that crawl into your nightmares and make even the most battle-hardened soldiers question their sanity. This is my story, one they tried to bury. But no matter how deep they dig, some truth refused to stay hidden. It was late October 2020 when the call came in. Oregon, forests. A string of disappearances, strange mutilations of livestock, and whispers of something unnatural moving in the shadows. It sounded like another routine investigation, the kind that ended with finding some lunatic in a beer costume or a rogue drone scaring locals. But this mission, this one was different from the start. The air on base was heavy as we prepped. There was no usual banter, no jokes to lighten the mood. Just a quiet, unspoken tension, like everyone could feel the weight of what we were walking into. My second-in-command Rodriguez handed me a dossier, his face pale under the flickering fluorescent lights. "Captain, you should read this." The file was thin, too thin for an op like this. A handful of photos, all blurry and nonsensical, a torn animal carcass, claw marks carved deep into a tree trunk, and a smear of something dark and viscous that didn't look like blood. Reports from locals mentioned sounds, human voices calling for help in the middle of the night, only for the callers to vanish. No bodies, no tracks, just gone. I snapped the folder shut and met Rodriguez's eyes. "We've seen worse." But even as I said it, my gut told me I was lying. The forest was alive in a way that felt wrong, like it was watching us. We set up base in an abandoned logging camp deep in the wilderness. The place reeked of damp wood and rust, its skeletal remains groaning under the weight of decades of neglect. Moss climbed the walls like green veins, and the air was thick with rot and something sharper. Something metallic that burned the back of my throat. Night fell faster than expected. By 1900 hours, the forest was black as pitch, the kind of darkness that swallows flashlights whole. My team moved methodically, searching for signs of anything out of the ordinary. It didn't take long to find them. Rodriguez called out first. "Captain, over here." I approached and saw what stopped him cold: a pile of bones. Animal mostly, deer, rabbits. But mixed among them was something that froze the blood in my veins. A human femur, gnawed clean. "Predator," one of the rookies whispered, his voice shaking. "No predator does this," Rodriguez muttered, scanning the shadows with his rifle raised. The air felt heavier, oppressive. Every creak of the forest sounded amplified, every rustle of leaves like a warning. Then it happened. "Help, over here." The voice was distant, faint, but unmistakably human. A woman's voice, desperate and trembling. "Help me." My blood turned to ice. We moved as a unit, fanning out in a cautious line. The voice called again, closer this time, but something was off. The cadence was wrong, like a recording played at the wrong speed. It sent shivers down my spine, but the rookie ahead of me, his name was Thompson, didn't hesitate. He broke formation and ran toward the sound. "Thompson, hold position." I barked, but it was too late. The forest seemed to swallow him whole. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. No sound. Just gone. We froze, rifles aimed into the blackness. The voice came again, mocking now, and I swear to God, it was saying Thompson's name. "Help me, Thompson." I felt a cold sweat run down my back as I realized something terrifying. It wasn't calling for help, it was hunting. That night was the longest of my life. We didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every sound made us jump. Every shadow looked like it was moving. And somewhere, deep in that cursed forest, something was laughing. This was just the beginning. If you want the rest, you'll have to hear it for yourself. But I'll warn you, some stories should never be told. The rain had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. It pressed down on us, heavy and unnatural, like the forest itself was holding its breath. We'd lost Connors. His screams still echoed in my ears, mingling with the squelch of wet leaves under our boots as we trudged back to the camp. No one spoke. What could we say? Whatever we were dealing with wasn't just a rogue animal. This was something different. Something wrong. The forest felt alive, and not in the comforting way nature is supposed to be. No, this was a predatory presence, slinking in the shadows, watching us. The team was on edge. Rodriguez kept glancing over his shoulder, his rifle gripped so tightly his knuckles were white. Sanders muttered to himself, the words incoherent but frantic. I wanted to tell them to pull it together, to remind them we were Phantom Viper, trained for the impossible. But the truth was, I was just as rattled. Back at camp, the fire flickered weakly, casting distorted shadows on the weathered wood of the abandoned logging cabin. It felt like a refuge, but only barely. I stood by the table, staring at the map of the area, trying to make sense of the chaos. The attack hadn't been random. The thing, whatever it was, had targeted Connors. It had waited, watching for the perfect moment to strike. This wasn't instinct. This was strategy. We need to call for extraction, Rodriguez said, breaking the uneasy silence. His voice was shaky, the fear barely concealed. No, I replied, sharper than I intended. Not yet. We're here to finish the mission. Finish the mission. That thing killed Connors like he was nothing. You saw it, Captain. We're not equipped for this. He was right, of course. We weren't equipped. But leaving without answers wasn't an option. Not with the bodies piling up and the brass breathing down our necks for results. Before I could respond, a sound cut through the night. A low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate in my chest. Everyone froze. It was close. Too close. My positions, I hissed, grabbing my rifle. The team fanned out, their movements precise but frantic. The growl came again, this time followed by a sound that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Not the warm, human kind. No, this was twisted, broken, like something mimicking the sound, but not quite getting it right. It echoed through the trees, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Captain, Sanders whispered, his voice barely audible. That's Connor's laugh. My stomach dropped. He was right. It was Connor's laugh, distorted and hollow, like a recording played back on a damaged tape. My grip on the rifle tightened as the shadows seemed to close in around us. The next hour was a blur of paranoia and tension. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig set us on edge. The thing was toying with us, herding us like cattle. It was intelligent, far more than any predator I'd ever encountered. And it wanted us to know it. We regrouped in the cabin, though it felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. Sanders found an old journal buried under a pile of debris, the pages yellowed and brittle. It belonged to one of the loggers who had worked here decades ago. His entries started mundane, talk of quotas and weather, but quickly descended into madness. The forest isn't right. One entry read, "We've woken something up, something old. It doesn't like us here." The last entry was scrawled in shaky handwriting. "It knows me. It's inside my head. God help us all." I set the journal down, my hands trembling slightly. The pieces were coming together, but the picture they painted was grim. This wasn't just a predator. It was a force of nature, a guardian of the forest, twisted by time or something darker, and it wanted us gone. As I stared at the flickering fire, a plan began to form in my mind. It was risky, borderline suicidal, but it was the only shot we had. We had to outthink it, turn its intelligence against it. "Get some rest," I told the team, though I doubted any of us would sleep. "Tomorrow, we end this." But even as I spoke the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already playing its game. And it was winning. My breaths came in shallow gasps, each one dragging shards of cold air into my burning lungs. The forest loomed around us, an endless sea of black shadows and twisting shapes that seemed to move in the corner of my eye. The rain had started again, light at first but now relentless, drumming on the leaves above and turning the ground beneath my boots into a muddy quagmire. We were down to three of us left out of a team of 8. Just hours ago, we were joking, sharing smirks under the guise of confidence. Now, Rodriguez was missing an arm, barely holding on, and Jenkins wasn't even a memory anymore. He was something the forest had swallowed whole. I gripped my rifle tighter, the metal cold against my hands, slick with rain and blood. Ahead, the faint glow of the trap we had set pulsed dimly in the suffocating darkness. A signal beacon modified with a crude heat signature that we'd rigged to mimic a wounded deer. It wasn't much, but it was the best we could manage. "This is insane," Rodriguez muttered, his voice barely audible over the rain. He leaned heavily against a tree, his face pale, eyes darting into the black void surrounding us. "It's the only chance we've got," I replied, keeping my voice steady even though every fiber of my being wanted to scream. I couldn't let him see my fear. Fear was contagious, and right now, it would kill us faster than that thing. The plan was simple. Lure it into the kill zone, force it into the open, and hit it with everything we had left. I knew it wasn't perfect. Hell, it wasn't even good, but nothing about this mission had been. This wasn't the kind of enemy you prepared for. A sound cut through the night. A low, guttural growl that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far enough either. "What? Ait," Rodriguez whispered, his voice trembling now. "It's playing with us, man. You know that, right? It's not just hunting us. It's testing us." I nodded slowly, my jaw tight. He was right. That was the worst part. This wasn't a mindless beast. It was calculating, studying, learning. Every move we made, it countered. Every trap we set, it avoided. It was like trying to outsmart a predator that already knew your every thought. The growl came again, closer this time. A chill ran down my spine, and I motioned for Rodriguez to move. "Go, get to the fallback point, stay low. If you see it." He nodded, cutting me off. "Yeah, I know. Don't look it in the eyes." I watched him stumble off into the shadows, his silhouette swallowed almost instantly by the encroaching darkness. I wanted to call him back, tell him to stay with me, but I knew that would only put us both in danger. Alone, I could move faster. The beacon pulsed again, its faint glow barely piercing the gloom. I crouched low, my finger resting lightly on the trigger of my rifle, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. And then, I saw it. At first, it was just a shape, a darker shadow against the blackness, moving with a fluidity that wasn't human. It crept toward the beacon, slow and deliberate, its movements almost graceful despite its grotesque form. The rain slicked its mottled, sinewy skin, reflecting faint glimmers of light as it advanced. I held my breath, my heart hammering in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get as far away from that thing as possible, but I couldn't. Not yet. It reached the edge of the kill zone, pausing for a moment as if it knew, as if it could sense the trap waiting for it. My pulse raced, and for a brief second, I thought it might turn back. But then it stepped forward, its head tilting slightly, the pale, empty eyes scanning the area like it was mocking me. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. The explosion ripped through the silence, a deafening roar that shook the ground and sent shards of light and heat tearing through the night. The trap had worked. Partially. The creature was thrown back, its hideous form writhing in the mud as the air filled with the acrid smell of burning flesh. But it wasn't over. Through the smoke and rain, it rose again, its movements jerky and unnatural now, but no less terrifying. Blood, thick and black, poured from its wounds, but it didn't stop. It never stopped. I opened fire, the recoil slamming into my shoulder as I emptied my magazine into the beast. Each shot felt like a lifetime, the flashes of the muzzle lighting up its horrific face, twisted in rage and pain. It lunged toward me, faster than it should have been able to, and I barely had time to throw myself to the side. I hit the ground hard. The wind knocked out of me, but I managed to roll to my feet, grabbing my knife as it closed the distance. The fight was brutal, primal. Its claws tore through my vest, its teeth snapping inches from my face as I drove the blade into its neck again and again. It let out a shriek, high-pitched and unnatural, that echoed through the forest, and for a moment I thought it might never end. But then, finally, it collapsed, its massive body slumping into the mud lifeless. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my chest heaving, my body trembling. The rain continued to pour, washing away the blood and the mud, but it couldn't wash away what I'd seen, what I'd done. As I stumbled back toward the fallback point, Rodriguez's voice crackled weakly over the radio. "Woody, you alive?" "Barely," I replied, my voice hoarse. "It's done, it's over." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Some things shouldn't exist, but they do, and now, I'll never sleep the same again.